In previous lessons, we learned how to solve one-step equations. We learned that if you have a number attached to a variable through addition, that you use the opposite or inverse operation to isolate the variable and find its value. Today, we're going to be doing two-step equations or even multi-step equations, and still isolating the variable to find the solution. Let's start by talking about the steps we're going to be following today. The first thing you're going to do in all of these equations is simplify both sides of the equation. When you're simplifying, you're looking for two things. You're looking for the distributive property, and you're looking for like terms. After you have simplified everything that you can simplify, then you're going to be left with a two-step equation. Now that's at this point in your solving equation career. Later on, there's going to be other steps that you're going to need to follow. But as of right now, you're going to be left with a one or a two-step equation. That means you have two numbers on the same side of the equals as the variable that you need to use the inverse operation for so you can get that variable by itself. These numbers need to be moved from one side of the equals to the other in a specific order. So the first numbers you're always going to move from the side of the variable with the side of the equals with the variable to the other side is the number that is added or subtracted. So you are first going to add or subtract numbers away from the variable. And then you are going to multiply or divide numbers away from the variable. In both of these situations, you are using the opposite or inverse operation. Okay, so let's start with an example. Let's say I give you the equation 2x plus 12 equals 4. Now we have to remember there are two sides to every equation. So we're always going to draw that line down the middle to make sure that what we're doing focuses on the correct side. So I first look to see if there's anything I can simplify. I look at the left side of the equation, 2x plus 12, and I check if there's any distributing or any like terms. I do not see any distributing or like terms, so I know that that side's completely simplified. I look at the right side to see if there's any distributing or any like terms. There's nothing on this side either. Now, what a lot of people want to do is they want to combine this 12 and this 4, but they're not on the same side of the equals right now. So that's not part of simplifying. To simplify, they have to be either everything on the left side or everything on the right side. So there's no simplifying in this problem. Step 2 says we're going to use the opposite operation to add or subtract. So we see that x is my variable, and that's the number that's the what I want to isolate. I want it in the end to be x equals. So what I have to do is I have to move the 2 and the 12, positive 12, away from the x to the other side of the equals. We are going to do that in this specific order. We are going to add or subtract first, and then multiply or divide. So I'm looking at my variable x, and I'm asking, is there anything on that side that's added or subtracted to the x? I see that it is plus 12, so I'm going to subtract 12. And we know whatever we do on one side, we have to do on the other to balance it out. I know that my 12 and my 12 cancel out, and you guys know very well that this is how your work has to be shown. 12 and 12 cancel out, and I'm left with 2x on this side of the equation on the left equals, and on the other side I have a 4 and a negative 12, so I know that that's negative 8. So I finished step 2, the adding and subtracting. Now I'm going to move on to step 3, which is multiply or divide. So I look at this, I have 2x equals negative 8. I know that 2 is multiplied to x, so to get rid of that, I'm going to divide by 2 and divide by 2. My 2's will cancel out, and I am left with x equals negative 8 divided by 2, which is negative 4. I can plug that back in to make sure it's right. 2 times negative 4 plus 12 equals 4. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8 plus 12 equals 4. Negative 8 plus 12 is 4 equals 4. Because that is true, I know that my solution is right. So I have x equals negative 4. All right, let's try another one just to make sure we got this, and then we're going to have you do some on your own and check your work. Okay, so let's look at w divided by 3 minus 5 equals negative 9. I draw a line down my equal sign. So again, I look, and on the left side of the equation, I don't see any distributing or like terms. And on the right side, I don't see any distributing or like terms either. So I'm looking to isolate the w, so it's all by itself, which means I need to move the 3 and the negative 5 to the other side of the equals. So which one do I move first? Well, we always add or subtract first in an equation. So I am going to add 5 because it's minus 5 or negative 5. And whatever I do to one side, I'm going to do to the other. So that negative 5 and positive 5 cancel out. And I'm left with w over 3 divided by 3 equals, I have negative 9 and positive 5, which is negative 4. So remembering when we have w over 3, that means w divided by 3. The next step is multiply or divide. There's 2 ways to look at this. Since it's w divided, the inverse or opposite of division is multiplication. So I can just multiply this side by 3 and multiply this side by 3, which gives me, so these 3's cancel out, and that gives me w equals negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. The other way you could look at it is remembering that when you have a fraction like this, it means it's the same thing as 1w over 3. So you could multiply by the reciprocal, which is really the exact same thing. Both of them cancel out, and you're left with w equals, and then negative 4 times 3 again, which is negative 12. It really is a preference in how you're going to look at it. If you consistently look at it this way, you won't forget the rule when you actually have a fraction in front of there, but both ways work. Okay, so now we're going to try some on your own. I'm going to give you a problem, and then what I would like you to do is solve that problem and then start the video again to see if you got it right. Okay, try 3 times x minus 4 equals 9. So when you started this problem, you should have noticed that there actually was step 1 simplifying in the problem. I see that on the left side, I have a number outside parentheses, which means I have to distribute. So I have 3 times x, which makes it 3x. And I have 3 times negative 4, which makes it negative 12. And on the right side, I still just have 9. There's no like terms or anything else to simplify, so that's my first step. That's simplified. Now I'm left with just a regular 2-step equation. I know I want to get x by itself. I'm going to add or subtract first. So I'm going to add 12 because it's minus 12. Add 12. Negative 12 and positive 12 cancel out. I'm left with 3x equals 21. And now I'm on my last step, multiply or divide. So I'm going to divide by 3, divide by 3. These 3's cancel out, and I have x equals 7. Now again, I need you to make sure that you are showing all of the work just like it's shown in the notes right here. You can test out your answer anytime you want. If I take that 7 and I plug it in, 7 minus 4 is 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. So 9 does equal 9. All right, let's try another one. The equation is 3y minus 8y plus 10 equals negative 5. All right, and I put my line in there and I check for anything that can be simplified. In this problem, there's no distributing because there's no number outside, but I do see that I have some like terms. I have a 3y and a negative 8y. So I'm going to start by combining 3y and negative 8y to give me negative 5y. And then this 10 cannot be combined because it is not a like term, it doesn't have a y, equals negative 5. I check for any more simplifying. I don't see any. There's no more like terms. There's no more distributing. And the other side, the right side, is just plain old negative 5, so there's no simplifying there. So I go on to the next step, and I know I need to add or subtract first. Now, in my years of teaching, I do have people that make this mistake. They will add 5 and add 5 because they see that minus in front of that 5. You have to realize that that is a negative 5y, which means it's negative 5 times y. So that 5 or negative 5 is going to be moved by division, which is not our first step. So we have to add or subtract first. That means I am going to minus 10 because it was a positive 10, and I'm going to minus 10 on the other side. Positive 10 and negative 10 cancel out. I'm left with negative 5y equals, I had a negative 5 and a negative 10, which makes negative 15. My last step is multiply or divide, and like I said, a lot of people want to add 5 here, but that 5 is not subtracted. That 5 is multiplied to the y. So I'm going to divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5. Negative divided by a negative equals a positive. I have y equals, and a negative divided by a negative equals a positive. So y equals 3. Great. So what I want to do now is I just want to do more examples that have different types of things you're going to see. We're going to put negatives in the division part. We're going to have parts where you have to do the reciprocal. We're going to put the number first instead of the variable first. In every single one of these problems, I want you to try them first and then come back and check if your answer is right. Okay, we're looking at 2/5 minus 4a equals negative 6/5. Give it a try. Let's see how you do. So this problem has multiple things that people tend to mess up on. So I want you to listen very, very carefully to make sure that you're understanding all the different concepts here. So first of all, there's no simplifying in this problem. When you look at the left side, there's no distributing, there's no like terms. And when you look at the right side, there's no distributing and no like terms either. When I see my variable a, I know that I have to move the 2/5 and also move that negative 4 over to the other side of the equation, so the a is all by itself and isolated. Now I know that I need to add or subtract first. So here's the first part where people start to get confused, all sorts of different things. People want to add the 4 because it looks like it says minus 4. But you have to remember that that negative 4 is multiplied to the a. So that is not the first number we're going to move. So what we have to do is we have to move this 2/5. Now, there are two different mistakes that people make when moving this 2/5. Because the last thing we learned was the reciprocal thing when moving a fraction, a lot of people want to multiply by 5/2 and multiply by 5/2. The problem is that 2/5 is not multiplied to the variable. The only time you multiply by the reciprocal is when your problem looks like this, where it's multiplied to it, or looks like this. Okay, those are 2/5 multiplied to a, or 2a over 5, which is the same as 2/5 multiplied to a. Those are reciprocal problems. So we're not going to do that here because that 2/5 is kind of sitting outside of it. So that has to actually be added or subtracted. This comes to the next mistake people make. Because this minus is back here, a lot of times people think you have to add 2/5. Well, that minus relates to the negative 4a. The 2/5, when you look at it, is actually positive 2/5. So to move that to the other side, I'm going to minus 2/5 and minus 2/5. Now notice I put that to the right of the fraction on the other side because I like to have my fractions lined up that way. So it kind of does make sense now. I have positive 2/5 and negative 2/5. Those cancel out. And what I'm left with is negative 4a equals. All right, so now let's look at the other side. It is so much easier to look at your numbers with the positives and negatives with the numerator when you're adding or subtracting. These already have a common denominator, so you need to realize that what you have here is negative 6 and negative 2. I have negative 6 and negative 2. So that means I have negative 8/5. Okay, so it doesn't get any easier from here. You can't simplify negative 8/5, so we're going to leave it like that. And I'm looking at what I have now, and when I look at this, I have negative 4a equals negative 8/5. I have to move that negative 4 to the other side of the equals. I know that it is multiplied to a, so I'm going to divide by negative 4, and I'm going to divide this fraction by negative 4. These negative 4's cancel out, and I know that I have a left. I'm going to write that a all the way down here because I need work to show you over here on the right side of the equation. So I have a fraction divided by a whole number. I'm going to actually make this whole number a fraction by putting it over 1. And now what I really have is negative 8/5 divided by negative 4 over 1. When I look at this, this now is no longer there because fractions are division like that. It's going to be written like this. Now I know that when I divide fractions, I change it to multiplication, and I take the reciprocal of the number I am dividing by. I look if there's anything I can simplify. There is not. So I'm just going to multiply this across. I have negative 8 times negative 1, which is positive 8, and 5 times 4, which is 20. And I was totally wrong in my simplifying. So now I can divide by 4 over 4, and I get 2/5, which I could have done here as well. So in this problem, I found that a equals 2/5. Really tough problem. The toughest you're going to see. Okay, 16.2 plus 8n equals 1.6 for the next one. Try it out. Come back and see how you did. All right, there's no simplifying in this problem. 16.2 plus 8n are not like terms. There's no distributing. So I need to add or subtract first. I'm going to move the 16.2 to the other side. It's a positive 16.2. So to move it, I'm going to subtract 16.2, or 16 and 2/10, and subtract 16 and 2/10. Now these cancel out. I'm left with positive 8n. It's not a negative. I have a positive 1.6 and a negative 16.2. So I know that I need to subtract because the signs are different. I'm actually going to do the math up top here because you have to line up the decimals when you subtract. 12 minus 6 is 6. Decimal drops straight down. 5 minus 1 is 4. It's 14.6, but it's a negative because 16.2 is bigger. Next step is to divide by 8 and divide by 8. My 8's cancel out. I'm left with n. I have to do 14 0.6 divided by 8. I'm going to do that off to the side over here. 8, the decimal goes straight up. 8 goes into 14 one time. That's 8. 14 minus 8 is 6. I bring down the 6, and that is 8. That's 64. Subtract, I get 4. I add a 0, bring that down, and that is 40, and I have 5. That gives me 40. So, I have 1 and 85 hundredths, remembering that my answer is negative because my signs were different. Please make sure to check for that positive or negative to make sure that you have that correct in your final answer with the multiplying and dividing. All right, let's try one more in the notes and then have you try some on your own. Let's do negative 2/3 x plus 3/7 equals 1/2. All right, try it out. Okay, first check for simplifying. I don't see any in this problem. So I move on to adding or subtracting. I have a plus 3/7, so I'm going to minus 3/7 from the left and minus 3/7 from the right. And again, I wrote it next to it because that's easier for me when I'm dealing with fractions. Positive 3/7 and negative 3/7 cancel out. And I am left with negative 2/3 x on the left side, and that equals 1/2 minus 3/7. I have to find a common denominator, which is going to be 14. I'm going to multiply by 7 over 7. That's 7/14. And multiply by 2 over 2. That is 6/14. 7/14 minus 6/14. 7 and negative 6 otherwise is 1/14. So now I have negative 2/3 x equals 1/14. I am going to get rid of the negative 2/3 by multiplying by the reciprocal. So negative 3 over 2 and negative 3 over 2. The 2's cancel out. The 3's cancel out. I'm left with x equals, I check for simplifying here. I don't see any simplifying for real this time. And I do 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. And 14 times 2 is 28. So I have negative 3/28. All right, I think it is time for you to try this on your own. So make sure you're checking your answers if you're unsure, and good luck.